While I was reading Purple Hibiscus, I actually kept thinking that Kambili's dad should never have been a father because he's just a bad parent. And I know we come from a society where we're always being told, oh, parenting is so hard, you cannot blame parents. But a lot of things that a lot of parents do are really damaging to children, and you would think that because they're adults, they would actually know this, but somehow they think that they can just get away with abusing their children. And when the children are old enough and they're like, hey, this was not right, they're like, oh, I was trying my best. Were you really trying your best? Or you were just cutting corners because you couldn't cope with the responsibility of being a parent? And the reality is we don't talk enough about how we have so many bad parents, especially in the African context. And this is why parents are not held responsible, they're not held accountable for how they're treating their children, and they end up damaging the lives of these children from the time that they're young, especially emotionally and psychologically. If we really became honest and spoke about this, we would realize that some people are not meant to be parents, and people should not be forced to be parents. There's nothing wrong with not having children, but we live in societies where we are always being told, oh, it is your nature to give birth, to multiply. But if you read Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari, he actually talks about how when it comes to biology, there's nothing that is unnatural. So anything that is possible is not unnatural. So if it's natural for people to have children, it's also natural for people to not want to have children. He goes on and talks about how biology enables women to have children, but it is the culture that obliges women, that tells women that you have been called to give birth, to multiply the earth. If you do not become a mother, you have no purpose in life. But actually, all these things that you're being told are natural, they actually don't come from biology. They come from Christian theology. There's nothing unnatural about not wanting to have children. And that's why this video is actually about why you shouldn't have children. Because it's really important to have different perspectives. Society is always telling us about why we should have children. I think it's about time that we start talking about why some people shouldn't have children. And number one is if you think that your child is an accessory. I'm always hearing people saying, oh my God, this is a mini-me. I can't wait until I have a mini-me. And then I can make them do this, this, and this. And every time I hear that, I'm just like, bad parent loading. Because you don't see your child as a human being. You think they're just an accessory that is just going to be there and making you look good. That's why you see a lot of people doing ridiculous things to their children. They're putting their children in ridiculous clothes. They're not even asking or even caring whether these children like doing these things. You hear someone like, oh my God, that is so cute. I can't wait to have a child so I can force them to do that. I'm like, that is so evil. And this kind of thinking breeds households where children are not taken seriously. When a child says, oh, I want to do this and this and this, people are like, no, you're just an accessory. This kind of mindset really breeds children that end up being very insecure. They lack self-esteem because they're never taken seriously. And this goes hand in hand with people who think that they own their children and they don't allow their children to have any kind of agency, because it's like, excuse me, you are a child, you don't know anything. But you know what, most of the time children know exactly what they want. They know when they're not being treated well. But because as a society we've internalized this thing where parents own children, we always think that the parent is always right. So even if something is going wrong, no one ever listens to the child, because we don't think that children are human beings. That's essentially the root of the problem. Because if we started thinking of children as human beings, then people would actually think twice before giving birth to children. People think they're just bringing a doll that they can just be playing around with, and then when they have the child and the child is like, I don't like that, I don't want to do that, they're now shocked, like, so you're a human being, so you actually want to do things on your own, so you actually have a personality of your own, and they get mad because they can't control you. And people who think that children are accessories or think that they own their children like property, they literally do this because they want to control these children, because they have control issues, and these people should never have been parents in the first place. But we don't want to talk about it. A lot of people don't realize that when you're giving birth to children, they don't belong to you. They come through you, but they don't belong to you. That's why you as a parent, you owe everything. even your own life to your child because you made that choice to bring them into this world, but the child owes you nothing. Even if you're like, oh my God, I sacrificed everything so that I could give you a better life. That is literally your job. You bring a child into this world, you have to ensure that they have the best life. And if that means you losing your own life, that's what it means. No one is forcing you to have a child. So instead of actually having children and traumatizing them because you can't do what you want, how about don't have children and go follow your dreams? Build your career if that's what you want, or just travel the world if that's what you want, so that someday in the future you're not looking at a child and being like, you owe me. You're the reason why I didn't travel the world. You're the reason why I don't have a career. No one forced you. No one forced you. And this idea that some parents have that they own their children is the reason why they curtail their own children from living their best lives, from pursuing their own dreams, because they're like, I own you, you have to do exactly what I want. And you can see how this unfolds in shows like the K-drama Sky Castle, where it actually shows how greedy parents are always thinking that their children are their property, and how they try to make excuses that they're doing this for their children, but in reality they're just doing it for themselves because they are greedy and horrible human beings and they're destroying the lives of their own children. There's also this caliber of people who think that their children are their legacy. These are the worst, and these should absolutely be banished from having children, because this means that that child is never going to have a life of their own. They can't even make mistakes. Why? They are the legacy. They have to be perfect in every way, because whatever it is that they do is going to be reflected back on their parents. Because what? You are the legacy. These are the parents that force their children to get into family businesses. Why? Because you're my legacy and you have to do whatever it is that I am doing. And I see this a lot, especially in the rich families, because they have to keep on the generational wealth going. But someone is less like, I don't want to be doing this. And I see this a lot in K-dramas. They have so many stories like this, where the rich son or the rich daughter is being forced by their parents to follow the parents' footsteps, and they don't want to do that. And the parent is like, I'm going to cut you off. I'm not going to give you any money. And I can imagine how horrible that kind of life is. I mean, people always be like, oh my God, if you have money, everything is good. But imagine, yes, you come from a family where you have lots of money to spend on whatever you want, but you can't be yourself. So what's the point? What's the point? And in Purple Hibiscus, we see how Kambilu's dad is actually mistreating his own children because he sees them as an extension of himself. And it goes even to a point where he's beating them, pouring hot water on their legs because what, they didn't become the first in school. Like, it's just crazy. It's just crazy the lengths in which some parents will go to just ensure that their children become the exact thing that they think the children should be. There are also these characters who think that children are going to save their relationship. And I find that this is something that is highly perpetuated, especially in African context, and other women actually are always telling other women, you know what, if you want your marriage to be fine, you should have a child. But literally, that doesn't make sense. If you're having problems with your partner before you have children, what makes you think that having a child is miraculously going to take all those problems away? What it's going to do is that the problems that you have are going to be pushed aside, because taking care of a child is hard, is a lot of work. But after some time, the problems that you pushed away are piling up, and then you also have the stress of taking care of a child. How is that saving your relationship? Instead of teaching women to leave bad relationships, it's like, oh my God, you should have a child. That's why we have some women who will actually get pregnant or trap men with pregnancies because they don't want to let go of these men. Like, hello, is your head working? And the worst thing that really happens in such situations where you end up having the child and then they don't end up fixing the bad relationship that you have, you end up resenting the child. Because what? You give birth to them so that they could fix your relationship. Then they don't end up fixing it. Now the child has to live with parents that resent it. My God, the trauma. This example clearly plays out in the Kuwaiti series The Cage on Netflix. My goodness. Why would anyone do this to themselves? And there are these people who are always like, oh my God, I can't wait to have children so I can beat them the way I was beaten. They literally fantasize about a using their own children. They think that abusing their children is okay because it was done to them. To these people, I say, please heal your traumas so that you don't have to traumatize a new generation of people. This is one of the reasons why Kenya as a society is just full of mentally ill people. Like the trauma that people are carrying, because a lot of Kenyan parents and African parents by extension believe that beating children, physical abuse, is the way to go. And this is not only done at homes, it's also encouraged in schools. And I remember even in school, the teachers who would beat children until they would break their arms. And the parents are like, wow, that is nice. Children should be beaten so that they can pass exams. First of all, they are children. They are powerless. If you are beating someone who cannot beat you back, you are abusing them. You are using your power to put them down. And if you can't have a conversation about why something is wrong, I don't think you're fit to be a parent, because it means that you don't even know how to communicate. You can't communicate with yourself about the traumas that you had. What makes you think that you can now raise another human being and be able to bring them up in the right way? And we really have to be honest, the people who are always abusing their children are people who actually never wanted to have children in the first place. These are people who just follow what society is telling them, who are like, oh my God, having children is literally a blessing, da 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 da. And then they have children and they realize the huge responsibility it requires, and they don't know what to do. So anytime the child breathes, they just want to beat them. When children do childlike things, they are beaten black and blue because they messed up. But they're children, they don't even know that it's messing up. Like, it's really important to heal your traumas before having children. And again, in Purple Hibiscus, Kambili's dad kept on telling his children that he's punishing them because it was done to him. Because he was punished, it saved him. He didn't even sit down to actually deconstruct whether the physical abuse he went through was right or wrong. He just carried it on, and now traumatizing his own children. And of course, it didn't end well for him. And then there are people who think that their children will take them out of poverty. And my question is always like, what makes you think you can give back to a child, bring them into this world, and they're miraculously going to take you out of poverty? You can't even take care of yourself. What makes you think you can take care of somebody else? I mean, what's the logic? What's the logic? And again, I see this a lot in African contexts, and you see these parents will literally push their children to go live with other successful people who are even toxic, who are assaulting these children. But these parents will look the other way because they're like, oh, my child is going to make me rich. They send their children to other countries to go work in toxic environments. They don't even care about the children. They only care that the children are sending money. These children have to live in this misery because what? Because they were born to take their parents out of poverty. They're suffering, but they're being told, oh my God, you should be thankful to your parents. Your parents brought you into this world. But it's like, the parents chose that. The child didn't choose that. So why are we forcing children to live miserable lives just because what? Because of what? There's so many stories of children who are being assaulted in their uncle's house, in their auntie's house, but no one is listening to them because their parents is like, oh, stay there so they can take you to school. Stay there so they can buy you this and this and this. Stay there because they're sending us money. Like, just don't have children. If you don't have the means, just don't bring children into this world, and work on yourself to a point where you can actually provide and then decide to have children. Instead of bringing in children just blindly, and there's this thing where Kenyans are always like, oh, kila mtoto anakuja na sahani yake, but excuse me. And these are the same people that go on social media and see other people living their best lives, and then they start hating, and they'll be like, oh my God, why are you spending that amount of money? If you had thought about whether you even want to have children in the first place, you would not be having those problems. There's a Swahili proverb that says, msiba wa kujitakia hauna kilio. If you choose to have children, you should absolutely know the kind of responsibility that is waiting for you. But because you refuse to think, because you refuse to use your brain, and you think that what other people are telling you is correct, You find yourself at a place where you're like, oh my god, I have a child, but I don't want this child, but I can't even return this child. So as people with brains in the society, we need to start using our brains to really think about the societies that we're creating, to think about the lives of children in these societies that we're living in. Some people, yes, are prepared to have children. Some people are actually made to have children and they even want to have children. But we should stop this nonsense of forcing everyone to have children because, oh, it's a stage of life, it's a goal of life. No. There's so many things that you can do besides having children, okay? There's so much life. And we need to stop with this nonsense of telling people that it's a natural thing for a woman to give birth to a child. No. What is unnatural is forcing people that don't want children to have children, because you are setting up those children up for failure, up for trauma, up for horrible lives.